Well, the embargo on the Pixel 9 has officially lifted, which means we can finally do a smartphone camera comparison. And the first device we're going to be comparing it to is the iPhone 15 Pro Max, which of course is probably one of the devices that most of you care about. Now, for this camera comparison, of course, we're going to be going over the camera specs, but then get to some side-by-side photo and video comparison to see how these two devices stack up in everyday use. Let's take a look. When looking at the camera specs on the Pixel 9, you actually get a pretty decent upgrade over last year's model with a 50 megapixel primary and 48 megapixel ultra wide. Now, these are the exact same sensors that you get on the Pixel 9 Pro and Pixel 9 Pro XL. The only difference on the back on these two devices is the fact that the 5x periscope camera is missing on the regular Pixel 9. But as for the selfie camera, it has a 10 megapixel sensor up front, actually 10.5 megapixels. That can record 4K video at up to 60 frames per second, as can the rear cameras on the back of the Pixel 9. When it comes to the iPhone 15 Pro Max, you get a 48 megapixel primary camera on the back of the phone, and then two 12 megapixel sensors as well for the ultra wide, but also for the 5x periscope camera on the back as well. And then for that selfie camera up front, that also is a 12 megapixel sensor, and all of those can record 4K video at up to 60 FPS.
As most of you probably know, I typically don't give full commentary on these camera comparison videos because I do want you to come to your own conclusions without me influencing you too much. But a lot of you have been asking for a little bit more commentary, so that's what I'm going to be doing today. So let's get to it. We're starting things off in the Little Italy neighborhood of Cleveland, which is always a great spot. There's some good architecture, a lot of colors, but also today with the partial cloudiness, we actually get some good contrast as well with the clouds passing over, but the sunlight shining through as well. But from the very beginning, you can start to see the main differences between the camera image processing on these two devices. The Google Pixel 9, though its image processing stack has been rebuilt from the ground up this year, still holds a lot of those same characteristics that we've seen over the years with a lot of HDR processing, which means the shadows have been brightened up a lot and the highlights have been toned down so they can see as much detail as possible.
Now, both of these devices do have really good selfie cameras for video capture, as we've already seen, but they do struggle still when you go from light to dark and then back to light again. Though the Pixel does have a slight advantage here. It does artificially boost the exposure of your face in low light conditions, just so that you can be seen a little bit more. Right here, as you can see, my face on the Pixel is quite a bit brighter than it is on the iPhone. But let me know if you like those results or not. It all depends on what you're actually trying to go for when you're recording video. Are you trying to represent something true to life, or actually give yourself enhancement so that people can see you more? Because, you know, most times people aren't making movies with these devices. They're just trying to record a video where they can see themselves and send it off to a friend or keep it for a memory.
But just because you do have all that additional detail doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a better shot every single time. When you look at the iPhone's pictures, you actually get some better contrast between the highlights and the lowlights, giving you a more dramatic feel, with the darks being incredibly dark, and you do get those highlights blown out sometimes, which is sometimes exactly what you saw in real life.
This here's a look at video capture from the selfie cameras on both of these devices. And I have to say, based off of the video quality that I'm seeing on the screen, they look pretty well matched. As far as dynamic range goes, the Pixel does look a little bit more blue with the sky, where the iPhone is a little bit more washed out there, as you see the sky peeking through the clouds. But as far as The color tones themselves, the iPhone always tends to be a little bit more pink than the Google. If you actually look at my skin tones, and I look kind of a little bit more gray on the Pixel. So let me know what you think of the results as far as the overall skin tones go. But as far as image quality goes, the 4K video capture does look pretty decent on both devices.
But then when capturing photos with those selfie cameras, I do think that the Pixel does have the advantage here with just overall better colors, better dynamic range, and more contrast as well. Just a little bit wider, allowing you to capture more in your shot. And then when you are taking portrait selfies, Google's effect just seems a little bit more natural, fading out as you get closer to the camera. With completely rebuilding the image stack this year on its Pixel devices, Google's actually dramatically improved the color shift issue that it's had in the past. Typically, when you took a picture with the ultra-wide camera and then switched over to that main camera, there was a shift in the color tones between the two, and Google's actually improved that significantly now, kind of matching what Apple's been really good at over the years, giving us that same color tone between the different cameras on its devices.
Well, as you can see, it is now officially dark, which means it's now time for some low-light photo and video comparisons between these two devices.
Like always, this is where you're going to be seeing the main differences between Google and Apple's image processing. Google's taking things to a whole nother level with its night sight capabilities, dramatically increasing the brightness of the shots, but also giving you a lot more vivid and rich images here. But in addition to that, you actually have to pay a close attention to the color tone here, because Apple tends to skew things towards the yellow side, while Google is trying to give you a pure white with its white balance.
Now, typically in these camera comparisons, I really don't touch the panorama mode, mainly because most people don't take panorama shots, and I don't either. But on this device, the Pixel 9, they've completely overhauled the panorama mode this year, allowing for it to capture HDR plus images, which should be a huge improvement. So we're gonna do a side-by-side comparison with the iPhone 15 Pro Max to see if this is actually better than what Apple can do on its smartphone. So this feature does work when capturing photos in daylight and low light conditions, but we're gonna start here at night. And on the Pixel, you have to hold the phone still when you get to these dots, because it is capturing HDR plus images in order to fill those in. So we're gonna see how this actually turns out in the end. It does take a little bit longer than what you would typically take on any other smartphone, but the results should be quite a bit better.
And I have to say, the results don't disappoint. The panoramic shot on the Pixel 9 Pro is absolutely phenomenal as far as colors and brightness goes in these situations. And the iPhone 15 Pro Max just doesn't deliver here. Though I will say, you do need to make sure you're stepping back from anything that's in the foreground just to make sure that there's not some weird stitching going on.
Video capture at night on both of these smartphones actually looks pretty decent. Of course, the iPhone does have that yellowish tint to it as opposed to the Pixel, which kind of skews on the complete opposite side here, trying to give you the ultimate white balance there. Actual real life is somewhere in between. But let's switch over to that main camera to see the color shift between the ultra-wide cameras and the main sensor. As you can see, they actually stick together with that white balance between the two, which is a big improvement on the Pixel side, because there was always a bit of a color shift between the ultra-wide and the main sensor. Tapping into 2x digital crop on that main sensor, and then of course you do have the big advantage on the iPhone having the 5x periscope camera on the back, allowing you to get in a lot closer to your subject.
One other difference that you might need to look a little bit closer at when looking at low light photography between these two devices is the difference in glare from light sources. On the Pixel device, it reins things in a little bit more so that you can get the closer look at the source itself, while the iPhone blows it out a little bit more, creating more of a halo effect over those light sources. It's subtle, but it's definitely there.
And this here's a look at video capture in low light conditions from the selfie cameras. Again, these aren't going to be the best when it comes to video capturing conditions like these, just because the sensors are a lot smaller. I'm going to flip things around in a second to show you what you can capture when using the main cameras on the back of the phones in these similar conditions. So let's take a look. And here we go, a look at the video from the main 50 megapixel camera on the iPhone, on the Pixel 9 and the 48 megapixel on the iPhone. This should definitely be a lot better. You have optical image stabilization on both of these, but those sensors are just so much larger, giving you a lot more light in situations like these where there's really not a whole light to go with.
And for those low light selfies, again, I do think that Pixel comes out on top in this comparison. And just for reference, even though the background is blurry on the Pixel 9 shots and it's not on the iPhone 15 Pro Max, portrait mode was set, but it wasn't able to capture the depth information to provide that portrait blur, which kind of a miss on Apple's part. But the overall results between these two are really good. It honestly comes down to preference. Do you want a brighter image that really shows off all the details? Or do you want a result that's a little bit darker, maybe a little bit more grungier, where the colors aren't as vivid?
And that's gonna do it for this camera comparison between the iPhone 15 Pro Max and Google's brand new Pixel 9. Based on the photo and video comparisons that I've taken a peek at already between these two devices, I would say things are pretty evenly matched between the two. The iPhone does definitely have the advantage when it comes to having that 5x periscope camera on the back, being able to just get in that much closer to your subject. But Google does have the Pixel 9 Pro models that do also have a 5x periscope camera, so we're gonna have to do a side-by-side comparison with those as well as soon as we get our hands on them. But let me know what you think of the results between these two devices and which device you'd rather use on a day-to-day basis for capturing your photos and videos. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.